Hello, this is the Blast Report podcast on all things blasting. My name is Evan Thibaud with New Wave Consulting, and I want to thank all the drill and blast teams along with those supporting them who are out there on the pattern. The production team at Blast Think and I would like to welcome you to today's episode of the Blast Report podcast. Well, Paul Sterk, how has retirement been? And do you want to give us a little update on why you decided to not be retired? And I think a lot of the demographic of this podcast here is retaining some knowledge from people who are retiring and they're not going to be coming to the conferences anymore. And we want to hear some stories. And, you know, I heard that you were retiring, but now you're back in biz, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I took most of last year off to get my knees fixed one at a time, and did the best in the West, and then I did a knee, and then I did another knee, and that took me up through the fall, up into almost Christmas. And then after Christmas, I did some consulting work. I'm doing a little consulting work right now. And then just about in April, I started talking with Tom Jenkins with Stemlock. And he wanted somebody to come to work with him to handle their international stuff. So 1st of May or whatever, I started back to work, and now I'm working, part-time, full-time, whatever you want to call it, as much as I want for Stemlock as their director of international sales. So mostly a remote job, so it's kind of really good for a retired guy. So yeah, I only got to travel to my office. So,
which is where you're recording from right now?
Yeah, I'm in my office right now. Yeah.
It's practically a museum there. Okay, but like what kind of, you always kind of struck me as the kind of guy who would never retire just because there's so much passion behind what you do and your knowledge and the subjects and stuff. But what kind of made you feel like you wanted to come back to work? Is it just, relevant?
Kind of bored. Yeah, bored. I was bored and getting bored, and even the consulting work is a lot of fun. I love the consulting side of it, but it's not all day, every day. Or if, I want, some days it's, might go 2 weeks without anything, so I want something I could work at every day if I want to. I don't have to, but I want to. So, and I just wasn't ready to retire, I guess. Just can't quite hang it up.
That's awesome.
So
I was told that you need a hobby for your health and a hobby for your brain when you retire.
Yeah. So my hobby is work, I guess, because I've never really had any hobbies. I've got my mining antiques, but
that's a pretty good hobby. I mean, if this podcast ever was, if we ever recorded visuals and whatnot, you could definitely see that you've got quite the museum behind you from all the auctions of Best in the West over all the years. And
I've been a collector right along, buying off eBay, and I bought a couple personal collections and added to mine. And so I was always going to start an eBay store, but now it's hard to part with it.
I was thinking that you should, we should catalog all your different memorabilias and parts and different items, and we should post stories about them and how you acquired them as part of the podcast and have kind of an online museum of antiquities.
Yeah, we might be able to do that. I've got some really unique old stuff from blasting,
That way,
back in the days where they were using matches and candles and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think it would be, we could do you have anything right in front of you right now that you just bought?
Not right in front of me, no. Right behind me.
Yeah, behind you, there's tons.
Yeah. Well, no, I got one in an envelope I could show you.
All right. Yeah. Whip that out.
I picked up this poster the other day.
Oh, nice. DuPont explosives, strength, safety and handling, and stability are
Yeah.
the three essentials found in all DuPont explosives. Wow.
1910.
Wow. How old were you then, Paul? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, little. I was little back then. So yeah, so that's I've been collecting them. I got one for Atlas powder, and they're just old advertisements.
I've got one right here.
Oh yeah, the old IME don't touch poster.
So this poster came to me in a kind of a unique story. I was working in British Columbia, and I happened to be in the field on that Saturday, which wasn't happy because I wish I would have been skiing at the time because it was winter. And I got a random phone call from the fire department saying that they think they had some explosives from they were cleaning out the basement of one of the miners who passed away, and his daughter was cleaning out the basement, going through all the stuff, and they found a shoebox that they think is explosives or something like that. And would I come on down and have a look? I was like, okay, I'm thinking that we got some remnants or something there, some old fuse, safety fuse. And I told him I'll be back at the office in about an hour by the time it took me to get back through the haul roads and everything. And I get back to my office, and lo and behold, there's not a single fireman around, and there is a shoebox sitting at the front doorstep of my office, not even inside, just right there. A 2-pound DuPont booster with the det cord plumb through it, still tied through. And I was kind of in shock. I couldn't believe, one, that the fire department would just leave it there unsupervised. That was what blew me away first. And then I had never seen a TNT booster in my career. So I was actually kind of worried about the crystallized structure that I could see from the top of the booster.
Yep.
I had always been worried about seeing the crystallized structure, and I was quite nervous about that. And then I saw the fact that there was det cord primed through it, which, that practice just does not cut it anymore, even though there are some people who still do that. And then I was actually less concerned about the fact that it was in some guy's basement. For some reason I could somehow understand that one of these guys probably found this booster while they were pushing dirt over a tailings or something, and he was probably a dozer operator and found it and was like, hell, I'm gonna go shoot this off one day with my boys or something. I don't know. I just, for some reason, that surprised me less than the fact that the fire department just casually dropped a 2-pound booster off at my front door that's already been primed. And so that stemmed a lot of phone calls on my end. And I ended up calling Dr. Worsey, and he had said, and this DuPont has, not to date myself here, but DuPont pretty much was out of business by the time I was born. And so I knew it was very old if it still had that logo on there. And I always met people who were senior in the industry, and whenever we'd meet them, they name drop their DuPont days back in the day, and it would always be funny to see, who used to be a bulk truck driver for DuPont and who worked at the plant, and everyone would kind of have this camaraderie about back in the good old days of DuPont. So I thought that was funny, and I was like, oh man, this is definitely 30 plus years old. And I called Dr. Worsey and told him I see some crystals on there, and he says, that's a TNT booster. Oh, you should sell it back to them. It's better than whatever shit that they're using today.
That's good.
That's a great booster. And so I called the mine. The first thing I could think of doing was calling the mine and bringing it up, and they were done shooting, done loading for the day, so there's nothing they could do. So we added it to their magazine, and took it down to the pattern and put it in a hole the next day and got rid of it. But I ended up having to call the fire department and let them know that maybe there should be a little training seminar that's done between you guys, because good thing that wasn't dynamite and they were all just picking it up and moving around,
Yeah, that goes back to education or training, especially IME puts out there, they've got some sort of a DVD they have on training on explosives and for fire departments. And I think it's really good.
Well, that's this piece, that's what I have framed here, is that was sitting on top of the shoebox.
So, yeah. And a lot of fire departments are volunteer and don't have this information, this training behind them. And it's something the ISE chapters can do, or you can do as a local person to go to your fire departments. When I was at the mine, we did it. We brought in all the different fire departments, and we brought in highway patrol and the police and everybody. So we give them a training session. And we actually did one for MSHA. We went down there because MSHA only knew two things, detonators and dynamite. And they had never seen it cord before. They'd never seen emulsions or water gels and ANFO. And we brought it all and showed them, and it was a good training session.
Wow.
So
and it was very well received from them, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Because even though they used to get this quote, used to have a really good explosive training session at Beckley. The new inspectors went through, but now that's been reduced from like 8 hours to one or two. So
on explosives specifically, or just
explosives training specifically. What to look for in that, and I don't know. To me, it's a full day to at least learn what the products are, because there's so many different things out there, And I remember a story. I got a good story here. I was going through TSA and in Houston, and I was talking about. He asked me what I did, and I told him. I said, "Yeah, you can all kinds of explosives there. I just got done going through the NAX plant, which is in Kentucky." North American Explosives, and they make this stuff for the military, for the Delta Force and stuff like that, and the Navy SEALs. And I said, they make a cord that's reinforced with, what's that stuff, the really tough stuff that they do police vests with and that?
Kevlar.
Kevlar, yeah. This cord is it's Kevlar coated, so it won't cut on coral when they go underground, and it's just like climbing rope. I said, see that climber over there? You can't tell me if that's a climbing rope or if that's explosive detonating cord. I said, you ought to check that out. And they did. They pulled the guy out of line and took him in the back room. So,
this is
but you can. No, this was in Houston.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but most people can't. You can't tell the difference between a Kevlar climbing rope and a Kevlar 50 grain cord or 100 grain cord. Because and you and I can't buy that. I mean, it's for the SEALs and for the Navy. They use it a lot. It's Kevlar coated cord. It's not something you buy off the street.
Yeah, it might as well be a chainsaw. Cut down some trees with that.
Yeah.
Wrap. I think we got to use that at the experimental mine once or twice. That's some high strength. 50 grain cord is definitely a thick piece of rope. Wow.
Yeah.
So you got to you got to visit that facility that they were making that cord only for military applications, and they were worried about it cutting on coral reefs underwater?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah. But anyway, there's a lot of military explosive out of there. Every war, quote, war we're in, all kinds of new explosives come out of it, like Desert Storm. All kinds of stuff came out of Desert Storm. So they developed cord that would shoot out like 200 yards and detonate on the other end coming back. So you didn't have to detonate it from your end and go out. And just weird things that they came up with, during
detonated on the other end. So was a wire spliced through the exterior, or?
No, I don't know how they did it on the outside. And I saw some stuff that they made, like for the Marine Corps for when they go on beaches. It's cord that's made into a web, and it shoots out with like a mortar and goes on the beach 100 yards or 100 feet by 300, or even bigger, and it blows everything. It's in 1 foot squares, and it clears anything that's underneath it for a foot down. So if there's got any landmines planted where they come on shore, it'll blow it all up. And they shoot it right out of a 55-gallon drum on the landing craft.
Wow. So it's like a giant fishing net. I'm sure someone's used it for that.
Yeah. So that's explosive you hope you don't run into, like a police force or a fireman or that stuff, because you wouldn't, so very few people are familiar with that. So
absolutely.
It's some stuff there.
I've learned that one of the ways of getting rid, we should probably have some members of EOD and the ATF on the podcast. That would be nice to see if I could get some of the guys there. That would be great. But we were doing something where we try to control the net explosives weight, which they're very aware of, is when it comes to an IED or a potential explosive device that they don't know. Let's say it's a backpack, they don't even know if explosives are in it, and they're going to check it. So they create a net, a little webbing of det cord, like 6-grain det cord, and it creates the impulse, the shock wave in between the net, the squares of the net. The impulse actually amplifies at the center of the squares, and it creates a higher pressure to get rid of whatever the explosives charge is, without having to use the same amount of explosives that would normally be used. I don't know if I explained that good enough, but in order to use, because creating a net with the det cord in the shape of multiple little squares, as the det cord propagates through each one, the waves converge in the center and they shoot outwards perpendicular at a higher pressure than what you would with a different explosive. So you would need to use more explosive to create that same impulse wave, and now it's done with less. So let's say if you're wanting to dispose of an IED, the last thing you want to do is add more explosives to that charge. So you're able to detonate it with adding that as minimal amount that's needed in order to initiate it and get rid of it. And I thought that was very, very unique.
Yeah, that is. And it's once again emphasizing that it's EOD people that should be doing that. You and I are not bound people.
Yes.
And either as a fireman or either as a first responder, that's EOD stuff. So, definitely. And I took a pipe bomb part once and almost lost my job for it. So I ain't going to do that no more.
You're allowed to tell that story?
Yeah, I guess I was. I was with another tech rep from another company, and we were driving in Wyoming, and we got a call from the local police department. We were heading up to a mine, and they got a call that they had a pipe bomb in the basement, or they had a pipe bomb at this building. So we said we'd be right back. So we drove back down another hour or something. We went in there, and by this time the highway patrol was there, and the Department of Criminal Investigation or whatever, and the nearest EOD team was like 4 hours out or something, and anyway, so the pipe bomb was there. We looked at it, and I asked where it was from, and they said, well, the lady brought it up from the basement. I go, oh, okay. Well, I'd been to a course that Paul Mule put on. That used to be the explosive engineer at Crazy Horse. Mm-hmm. He was also EOD in the military big time, and Redstone Arsenal and all that kind of stuff. And he had all kinds of different pipe bombs, and most of them, 90% of your pipe bombs have a mercury switch in it. So if you pick it up and turn it, it's going to go. Goes boom. And I go, well, the cleaning lady brought it from the basement. So I went, I told the guy I was with, I said, we should be all right here because this is, she's moved it already. So we got a wrench, a big wrench, and tied the pipe down and pointed it out the window so it wouldn't hurt anybody if it went off, hopefully. And took the end off, and we took the other end off and they had a squib in there to start it. There was some like black powder stuff in that, and emptied it out, and then they called the bomb squad to come get it. I go, well, there ain't gonna be nothing for them to do, but here it is. And anyway, my boss found out about that. He was not too happy. He goes, that's what they got EOD people for, not you. So, but in that time, my confidence level was high because the lady, because if it had a mercury switch in it, she'd already been gone.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. And then, you probably looking at everything, seeing that it's been moved, it probably didn't look too high tech if it was just a metal pipe. And
it was all tied in with drugs. It was in a drug, the people that used to live there were into drugs, or they had arrested them. They were gone, and there was a drug investor, DEA guy there, and he was standing off the end of the table. That was probably the funniest thing that happened, was he was standing off the end of the table and said, you want to move in case this thing goes off as I'm pulling off this knob here on the end of the bomb, because if it goes off, it's going right through you and out that window, He jumped out of the way.
It's a cannon.
Yeah, he goes, you guys are crazy. And I go, yeah, some days. So... But that was the end of my EOD career.
That brief and one moment of being a hero.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did that make the news, or did you stopped it from making the news?
We stopped it from making the news.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I could see the commercial explosives boss in that scene saying, "We do not have the insurance for that kind of work."
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, one of the things, I mean, that's pretty unbelievable story to hear that's happened to you. I mean, I've only ever been very disappointed in most of the movies from what I've seen, where they're stressing over which wire to cut. I try to think of most electric caps, and I think of, well, the red or the blue one, you could just pull that detonator right out of that C4 and be done with it, just walk away. Just don't even cut one of the wires. Just pull the detonator out and leave,
Yeah.
And I try not to tell too many of my friends this, or anybody, to ruin Hollywood, right? I don't want to ruin it for them, but it's unbelievable how many that is. I had the wonderful benefit of going to a JAG class. This is a class taught by Dr. Katherine Johnson at Missouri Science and Technology, where they train members of JAG. You remember that TV show, JAG?
Mm-hmm.
I forget what it stands for, but it's essentially they're going through the program and law enforcement inside the Navy and Army, and so they go to the class and we learn how IEDs are made and how we can investigate after they've been detonated. So what are the tall tale signs of these types of situations? And it's pretty remarkable to think about how much evidence is still left after an explosion.
Oh, yeah.
I did not realize, because coming from the civil explosives applications where you see, what we pump down a hole, people will take the wrapper from the non-electric shock tube and they'll drop it down the hole. I see people drop their trash down the borehole from their lunch. They're like, oh, it'll get consumed. They all say, that'll get consumed. That's where we toss our trash, while they're loading. And then they stem on top of it or something, Coca-Cola bottle and things like that. And then I went to this class and we did simulations where the professors would set up different types of explosives and different containers of the explosives, different initiators. It's called SPICE is the acronym for the different things to look for. And we blew up these simulated rooms, and it was an unbelievable amount of evidence still intact, just spread out everywhere, let's just say.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And I thought to myself, this whole time we thought everything got consumed. It makes me not want to put any trash down a borehole anymore. It makes me want to take my trash off the pattern now and not just, they say it evaporates. No, it just gets rapidly energetic disassembled. Right. And they were telling me that there's a story of a man who had purchased a toolbox from one of these hardware stores, and he went and put an IED, a charge inside of it, and detonated it somewhere as a terrorist attack. And when they arrived on scene, they found the bottom of the toolbox with the sticker still on it with the barcode. So they just picked it up, went to the hardware store, and the guy paid for it with a credit card.
Yeah.
That's it. Investigation over.
Well, it's amazing what they've done. They were working, the ATF has got some wonderful programs they've done, like they were blowing cars up at White Sands, New Mexico. And based on where the parts land, they did all these surveys on where the parts land. You can decide what kind of powder it was in that. And one of the first big trials for that was at Oklahoma City. And if you'll remember, they found that axle with the VIN number on it. And the ATF office that morning across the street from that building was running the simulation. And when that building went, they ran a simulation with it, and they figured out where that axle should have landed. And sure enough, that's where that axle was, where the cops found it.
Wow.
And that was the one that had the VIN number on it that basically eventually they worked their way all the way back with it.
So they had already been looking at that simulation in those vehicles prior to Oklahoma City.
Oh yeah, yep. They were
in Oklahoma City. You're saying across?
Well, they were that office happened to be running the software that day.
Wow.
Learning how to use it. So yeah, majority of the work was done at White Sands, New Mexico. They did a lot of testing out there.
I remember when I was a student, they were testing a sea container out there.
Yeah.
And determining that the corners of the sea containers were the safer places to be, which actually goes back to the net process that I was talking about, where you have the higher impulse on the flat end of the container or in the square. Yeah. But it just goes to show, what we do for a living is civil explosives and construction, and we're trying to provide blasting and fragmentation for, I guess, the betterment of society, if you want to say it that way. And when we tell, at least personally, when I tell people what I do for a living, they tend to think that I'm either making bombs or getting rid of bombs. And it's just interesting to know that a whole career can be made and not have much knowledge on the fact that a lot of these people are trying to do whatever they can to harm people with them,
Yeah, and ours is for the betterment of life, actually. We use it for making minerals, for making rock and stuff that people use every day and don't even realize where it comes from, so. But there's a lot of that. I keep going back to circling back around to that training. I had another incident where I don't know if I was at home or I was on the road. Anyway, I got a call, and it was from the SWAT team in Los Angeles and the DEA, and they had, I don't know where they got my name, but
they already had it, Paul.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. I do have an FBI file, so. That's another story, but they had just raided a drug house, and they were going through the basement and found a whole bunch of explosives in there, and it was water gel explosives, and I said, well, I felt a little better, and it wasn't dynamite, and they said, well, it's some sort of a water gel that had the label. I can't say who it was. And they said, what would you do? And I said, you got any gasoline there? And they said, yeah, we got gasoline. I said, spread it all over that house and burn that baby to the ground, and it'll take care of it. So I got a call about 2 hours later, and they said, yeah, we put gas everywhere. We flamed that thing, man. It was really cool. We burned it right to ashes, and everything was gone. I go, see, told you.
Wow.
But they didn't know what they were facing, but they were smart enough to call somebody, and I really didn't know. But I'd always been taught, to burn it. You can usually get rid of it as long as you're not burning boosters or something.
Mm-hmm. And is it because it was a water gel that burning it was even the better method?
I would think so, but that's me.
Yeah.
Water gel or an emulsion. If it's a dynamite, I'm a little more leery about burning dynamite like they used to in the old days.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to dispose of it in that method. I have heard of burning products to get rid of it, but a lot of times people get very close to the temperature where it can mass detonate.
Yeah. So they're getting away from that. They're doing any of that anymore.
Yeah, that's not something that I've learned is how to get rid of anything when it comes to burning. But I know emulsions are safer than AMFO because its burning point is lower, right? So it's higher. So higher. It can, so they can hit a certain temperature while burning it and not have the same problems. Unfortunately, there's been quite a few stories over the years of people trying to get rid of AMFO and they've been burning it and they got too close, or finally it ran off and detonated. Even when they were intentionally getting rid of it, I'm not talking about transportation situations. I'm talking about they set off to get rid of excess material.
Yeah, it's always, it always goes back to remembering it is explosives and they're made to blow up,
Mm-hmm.
They're made to detonate. So you always got to be, and sometimes they detonate under very weird circumstances, but they still detonate because they are an explosive.
Yeah. And I guess over time too, if they degrade, if they're not as chemically balanced like TNT was, and that booster sitting in the bottom of a basement for forever, then they can start to oil can go in the wrong places. And I didn't do too well in chemistry.
But that's why the military, the Department of Defense, they have a thing where like in the Army and the Marines and all, any place that's using dynamite, they flip their stock every 30 days. They rotate their stock 180 degrees, so that if it's the liquid starting to come out of the stick, it's starting to go down through the stick, and then it'll crystallize. They flip it over, and then it runs the other way. So, which is a good practice if you got dynamite, rather than letting it sit, like you said, in the basement for 10 years. It's going to crystallize. So, and it's dangerous. There's no two ways about it. So there's been stories of people buy old dynamite boxes and fix them up, put some new nails in them, and they go off. The box just blows up. Because it's been saturated over the years with crystal. And
the nitroglycerin's in the wood.
Yeah. They had a serious fatality at the Trojan plant in Spanish Fork, Utah, which is no longer there. In an old building, I don't know what they made there years before, but two guys were carrying a wooden conference table out. They lifted and carrying this big table out, and they got too heavy, and they dropped it, and the floor detonated. And it's from whatever they were making in there all them years. It soaked into the wood, and the wood was actually explosive. So anytime you're around any old dynamite and that, you need to be careful.
Wow.
So, or where it's been made, you just don't know. So let's burn her down.
Wow. And when was that they dropped that table? I had never heard this story.
20-some years ago. Like I say, it resulted in a fatality. So, and a fire. So.
Have you ever been in the field where you've seen crystallized dynamite that you've had to, be called upon to dispose of it?
No. I've seen pictures of it before, and I've seen it before, but I've never touched it if it looked that bad. It's pretty serious.
Mm-hmm.
So
I heard it's a big problem out west in, small towns out in Idaho, people who had bought it at a hardware store and put it in a shed a long time ago or something.
Yeah, well, you have to check the dates, but until real recently, you could still, in a couple states, recently, 20 years, but that's recent to me.
That's fairly recent, yeah, when you think about it.
You could still buy dynamite at the hardware store without a license.
Oh, absolutely.
For taking out tree stumps and stuff like beaver dams. So a lot of people had it in their garage or on the ranch, So,
have you ever? I always tell people about the Texas cistern story. Maybe I could try to take the recording off the internet and on YouTube and maybe make an episode just out of it. We'll see if we can doctor see if we can make it sound any better. But it is an amazing story of why dynamite is no longer sold at hardware stores. And if you're interested, you can go on YouTube and type in Texas cistern story, and it's got a guy with a damn good accent telling a really, really funny story that luckily no one was hurt, but some egos and a very upset wife. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I was in Bolivia quite a few years ago, and there was just dynamite there for sale at the hardware store next to the pickaxes, and pretty impressed that was still the practice in some places. When it comes to being able to access that and seeing how different countries handle it, you could only think of people putting it in the back of their truck and just forgetting about it on a hot day for a long time, just throw it in the storage shed, and then you wonder why the fire department gets a call one day and they just see dynamite in the back of a shed in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee,
and you see that too with some places that used independent. The Forest Service, believe it or not, sees a lot of this in forest fires. They see problems with the explosives. That's another area. Now the ATF is much better and the licensing has got much better, but there was a lot of 1 or 2 man mines that mine on Forest Service will say for slate or something like that. And they have magazines, and a lot of good thing for a magazine used to be a refrigerator. They put the detonators in the freezer part, and they put the other part down below. They plugged into nothing, but they'd separate them because they knew they were supposed to be separated, but they'd use a refrigerator. So they were having they'd get these forest fires, and the refrigerators burn up and blow up, So it's a hazard to the fire department once again. So if you see a refrigerator out in the woods, you need to be careful. So not an uncommon way to store explosives. I was impressed that they were smart enough to put it in the freezer and put the detonators in the freezer and the explosives in the lower half of the fridge. But,
wow. I would, they're probably looking for a nice cold beer in a refrigerator out in the woods. That's the last thing that they'd be thinking about is seeing a giant box of detonators stuck in a freezer box next to the ice trays.
So
I had a customer call me they had to fire an employee, and they found det cord and the caps in just a regular toolbox in a shed. Their explosives responsible person had needed to take things from the magazine and go somewhere else with their product, but they had just threw it in their regular old toolbox and was not the responsible person. And it was quite interesting to see how they set up and got away with it for a long time before I got there.
And a lot of times it circles right back down around to training. When I was younger and I was mining, my job was mining. That's all I was worried about, and we knew that they weren't supposed to be mixed. So, we carry a couple sticks of powder in my right boot and the detonators in the left. So that way they're separated, but you needed them. You didn't want to have to go back twice, walk all that distance back to the magazine. So just put it in one boot and the other. So, And that's not a really good thing to do.
Yeah. That's all.
You don't ever want to get stopped by an MSHA inspector.
With a 2x8 sticking out the left.
Yeah.
Well, how big were your boots, Paul?
I always bought them bigger so you could do that. You stuff your pants in, so they're, my boots are big. We're leather. We're talking rubber boots,
Yeah, big old knee highs, right?
Yeah, they're easy to stuff stuff in. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you'd always tell young miners and new miners where I worked when I was back at home state, because new miners, we'd all tuck our pants in, into our boots, and the old guys always had their pants over their boots. I couldn't figure that out for the first couple of weeks, and then I was watching on the ramp one day, and the game is to put a lit cigarette down the guy's boot. That's got his pants stuffed in, so.
That was the hazing that people did.
Yeah, a little bit of hazing with the young guys. So I learned that real quick. I never got a cigarette down my boot, but I saw it happen, so. But,
I'm glad that. Yeah, I could easily see that happening. Little toss down the boot. That's you underground miners are a different breed.
Yeah, we are. It's a different life. It's a hard life, but it's good, and they're very, very tight-knit group.
Yeah, that's true. Well, thanks for coming on the show again, Paul.
Okay.
I appreciate having you on.
Good talking to you again, and we'll be around.
Cheers.
So, okay, cheers.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Blast Report podcast. I want to thank the team at Blast Think for producing this show, and please follow along for more episodes in the future, and share this podcast with your colleagues so we can continue to honor our industry and the people in it. Be safe and have a blast.